In this video, I'll show you September 24th, 2020, the Gilbert bystander, who I will refer to as Mr. Bystander, was flying his drone around the intersection of South Gilbert Road and East Warner Road. In Gilbert, Arizona, where weekly protests had been occurring in the wake of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Mr. Bystander was documenting the protest from a nearby location when he was confronted by Officer Glenn, Officer Strickland, and Officer Nunez of the Gilbert Police Department.
How you doing today?
Good. I don't really want to talk to you guys.
Too bad. I'm Officer Strickland with the Gilbert Police Department. The reason I'm contacting you today is for flying a drone above our operation.
I was flying it on above the side of the street.
Okay. Well, per ARS 13-3729A1, it's a unlawful operation of a model from an aircraft. Okay, above a police operation. You have ID with you.
I wasn't above a police operation.
You are. That is a police operation.
I have video. I was.
Do you have ID with you, sir?
I don't have ID.
Perfect. I can write it down. Okay. What's your first name?
Hold on. Can I? Why are you closing in on me? Why are you closing in on me? You guys are making me.
It's hard to hear, man.
You guys are making me really nervous.
Okay.
It's just loud.
What's your first name?
You guys are making me really nervous.
Are you failing to identify yourself?
Hold on. I want to talk to you guys first.
That's fine, talk to us.
Say what you need to say.
I have video that I wasn't above a police officer.
Okay, do you want to show me?
No. If you want to write me a ticket, I'll show you in court.
Well, what's your first name then?
You need to identify yourself, though.
For what?
If
Because
you
you're
fail to
being detained.
identify yourself, you will be arrested. Okay?
I'm weighing my options here.
Here, let me help you out. State law says when you're being detained by a police officer under suspicion of a possible crime, you have to identify yourself using your name and date of birth. Okay?
I don't agree that there was any crime broken. I know
That doesn't matter. That's for the courts to decide.
I'm licensed with the FAA. You guys don't have any control over airspace. You do have control over ARS and.
Yeah. Well, ARS.
I just quoted ARS.
ARS.
I wasn't above any police operation.
That the whole intersection is a police operation right now.
So, as the use of drones becomes more prevalent, more states are debating the regulations and legislation surrounding their use. And much of that legislation is warranted, given that there are over 1.1 million recreational drones registered with the Federal Aviation Administration. Since 2013, at least 44 states have enacted laws addressing drones, and an additional 3 states have adopted resolutions. Arizona is no exception, and the code that the officers are referring to, Arizona Revised Statute 13-3729, provides a brief outline of the legalities surrounding drones in the Copper State. Subsection A2 of the code states that it is unlawful for a person to operate a model aircraft or a civil unmanned aircraft if the operation interferes with a law enforcement, firefighter, or emergency services operation. There are no sections of the code that specifically state that drones cannot be flown over a police operation. It should be noted that subsection A, 1 of the code, essentially authorizes Arizona officers to enforce FAA regulations, and I was unable to locate any FAA regulations that specifically pertain to flying a drone over a non-emergency police operation. Considering that the police operation that Officer Strickland was referring to was taking place in public, it is highly unlikely that it would be off-limits to being filmed by a drone, so long as the drone does not directly interfere with the operation.
You guys are making me nervous.
Why are you nervous?
Because you guys are surrounding me. You guys have been hassling me for days. Can I get your name and badge number, please?
It's right here.
A. Goyant, and the badge number, please?
5779 is my badge.
5779, and you, sir?
Strickland 3401.
And you, sir?
Nunez 5948.
So you talked about how I won't show you how I'm flying my drone legally, and I don't want to be a jerk, and I mean this respectfully. It's not my job to prove that I did something illegal. It's your job to prove. It's your job to prove that I did something illegal. This is a public space.
No line of sight on your drone.
Yes, I do have line of sight on my drone. Because I was
I
flying
can't
it.
see the intersection.
I was flying it from right over here, and you can see clear all the way over there.
This is my boss here.
What's your name and badge number, sir?
Jim Lottie, 438.
Thank you.
What's your name, sir?
I first I want to talk to you about something really quick.
Okay, what's your name so I know who I'm talking to?
You can call me a good citizen for right now.
No, I'd like your name, not good citizen.
I just want to know which law that I broke, because I wasn't directly above anybody. Okay. The rule says that you can't interfere with the police activity, which I absolutely did not do.
Do you have your pilot certificate or your UAS certificate?
I do. Your guy says that it's illegal to be above a police activity. That's not true. It's illegal to interfere with the police activity.
Right.
Something I did not do. FAA rules, no state or city law says that you can't fly above people.
Yes.
Which
the
I did
FAA
not.
says you cannot.
The FAA's regulation of drones began in 2012 with the FAA Modernization and Reform Act, which approved non-commercial flights under 400 feet if they followed Advisory Circular 91-57, which was the operating standards for model aircraft that was published in 1981. The Modernization and Reform Act also set a deadline of September 30th, 2015 for the agency to establish regulations to allow the use of commercial drones. In early 2015, the FAA began experimenting with news agencies to determine the efficacy of the use of drones for news gathering, and on June 21, 2016, the FAA released Part 107, which required commercial drone operators to obtain a remote pilot certificate. The special rule for model aircraft within Part 107 governed the recreational use of drones and allowed hobbyists to fly in unrestricted airspace below 400 feet without a license and with few limitations. On October 5, 2018, President Trump signed the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, which applied slightly more stringent rules to operating recreational drones. Many of the rules established in the Reauthorization Act overlap with the standards set forth in Part 107. But the new laws of the Reauthorization Act banned flying drones over groups of people who were not participating in the drone's flight. The language of the laws were relatively vague and did not offer a specific definition for what exactly constitutes a group of people. So, it is debatable whether Mr. Bystander actually flew over a group of people at any point, and he assured me that he took precautions to avoid flying over anyone. All that said, the FAA does advise against flying over public events, but I was unable to locate any specific language in the bill that outlaws doing so. While the FAA may advise against flying over public events, it appears as though there are no legally binding statutes that reinforce that recommendation. Without the actual footage from the drone, it is impossible to verify whether Mr. Bystander did or did not fly over anyone, and we will discuss whether the officers had reasonable suspicion to make contact with Mr. Bystander in a moment.
We have our own drone. We're trying to fly above this operation.
You're not flying right now, though.
Doesn't matter. We can't deploy it if you're up there flying around.
Yeah, but what I wouldn't be able to do is interfere, so...
you putting your drone above there is interfering us from deploying ours if we want.
You said that on camera. I would be careful what you say is the law. Be careful what you say is the law, because I know the rules very, very well.
Okay.
And I know that you guys don't like me.
Why do you say that?
Because you've hassled me before.
I've hassled.
You've talked about hassling me
When have I
before.
hassled you?
Why are you shaking? I don't understand why you're so nervous.
Because you guys, I'm engaged in a lawful activity, and you guys come up and surround me and ask me a bunch of questions, make me think that I'm breaking the law, try to convince me that I'm breaking the law even, and I'm not.
I just cited ARS. That's all I did.
You cited it incorrectly. It's not.
No,
it's
did
not.
I not?
It's
It was
not.
taken directly from
It's
ARS.
not illegal to fly above a police operation. It's illegal to interfere with a police operation.
It is unlawful for you to fly it over where other people are at. And where you're flying, you're talking about the sidewalks and the intersection, there are people there.
I have video that I did not fly above anybody directly. I did some circles above. You can see me going, but there's no state law that says you can't fly above anybody. That's an FAA regulation, and if you want to report me to the FAA, that's the information to do it.
We are investigating
what we believe is not lawful activity. And
Which crime
the
would it be?
We think that you were flying that where you shouldn't have been flying it. Okay, that's why we're contacting you.
You're
The
investigating.
officers have already explained to you that under Arizona revised statute, if somebody has violated the FAA laws, that is a criminal offense.
Which
And so
that's
what we're,
there's no
that's what we're
criminal
investigating.
offense
Now,
about
part-
flying over
part of
somebody.
Stop
Which
interrupting me, please.
okay,
I'm explaining things to you before you end up in handcuffs.
okay.
Okay.
What would I end up in handcuffs
Because
for?
we have a town ordinance that says when a police officer is investigating potential criminal activity or even civil violations, if a person does not comply with the request for identification, they are guilty.
They have a misdemeanor, can be arrested. Mr. Bystander provided me with his drone S flight path that sparked this interaction, and it does show his drone flying over the event, although Mr. Bystander may have been careful not to fly directly over anyone. The fact that he flew so close to the event may have granted the officers the reasonable suspicion necessary to make contact with him. If the officers witnessed the drone flying near a group of people and legitimately thought that the drone had passed over them, then the officers would be within their authority to investigate whether or not a crime was committed. Arizona Revised Statute 13-2412 states that it is unlawful for a person after being advised that the person's refusal to answer is unlawful to fail or refuse to state the person's true full name on request of a peace officer who lawfully detain the person based on reasonable suspicion that the person is committing, or is about to commit a crime, and that a person detained under this section shall state the person's true full name, but shall not be compelled to answer any other inquiry of a peace officer. The sergeant also refers to Section 42-180 of the Gilbert Code of Ordinances, which contains very similar language to ARS 13-2412. If Mr. Bystander were to challenge the legality of the stop, there is a good chance that the officers would be entitled to qualified immunity, considering that the laws and FAA regulations surrounding the use of drones are extremely new, and courts have granted officers qualified immunity for much less in the past.
Identify who you are to us. You are going to be arrested for failure to obey a police officer. Do you understand that?
I understand that now that you're accusing me of, now that you're suspecting me of a specific crime of which I still don't know.
I told you,
I'll tell
believe
you
that you were flying over people where you shouldn't have been flying over people.
I'm glad
I don't
you-
know how much clearer.
I'm glad you said that, that flying over people is what you're suspecting me of doing.
The video abruptly ends there, but I managed to get in contact with Mr. Bystander to give his account of what happened after the video ended.
So I had provided my name to the sergeant who was talking to me. I provided my date of birth. I let them know that I'm giving both of those pieces of information under duress and that I'm not providing any information consensually. I felt that that was a good idea to say on camera. The sergeant then vaguely suggested to me that they would be reporting me to the Federal Aviation Administration for what I don't know. The sergeant then asked me if I had let air traffic control of the nearest airport know my plans to fly the drone in this area. I let the sergeant know that I was flying in uncontrolled airspace, meaning it is not within 5 miles of an airport. The sergeants basically asked me if I'm aware that if the intersection of Gilbert Road and Warner Road is 4.8 miles from Chandler Airport. And I let him know that I don't know anything about specific distances of the intersection, but what I do know is that I'm flying in uncontrolled airspace per FAA maps. They were basically ready to let me go. They said, "Do you have any other questions?" I asked them, "Is this going to be an issue every time I'm flying my drone? Are you guys going to come bother me every time you see me flying?" They basically said, "If we believe that you're flying above..."
The Gilbert officers get AB- because although they may have had reasonable suspicion to make contact with Mr. Bystander, the officers continually accused Mr. Bystander of a series of escalating infractions that were not necessarily accurate and maintained relatively unprofessional behavior throughout the encounter. First, the officers accused Mr. Bystander of flying over a group of people. Then, they accused him of not having line of sight on his drone. Then, it was interfering because they couldn't fly their drone. There are no regulations that prevent two drones from occupying the same airspace, so it is difficult to understand how Mr. Bystander's drone would have impeded the officers' ability to fly their own. The officers also made no effort to de-escalate the encounter and establish a positive relationship with Mr. Bystander, and instead chose to make snide remarks and accuse Mr. Bystander of lying. All that said, the officers were within their authority to make contact with Mr. Bystander and force him to identify himself. The Gilbert officers also chose not to cite Mr. Bystander, even though they certainly could have. But whether or not that citation would have held up in court is debatable. In an interaction that could have simply amounted to the officers informing Mr. Bystander that he needs to be more careful about where he flies his drone, the officers decided to force Mr. Bystander to identify himself and threatened him with arrest. Although the officers were within their authority to conduct an investigation, simply making consensual contact with Mr. Bystander and informing him that what he was doing was dangerous would have likely rendered the same result, but without the unnecessary intrusion into his privacy. Officer discretion played a major role in this interaction, and much of the tension of this encounter could have been dissolved if the officers had made more of an effort to be friendly and understanding. Mr. Bystander gets a B+ because although he was not aware that the Gilbert officer retained the authority to enforce FAA regulations under ARS 13-3729, he maintained a calm and collected demeanor throughout the encounter, corrected the officer's misrepresentation of the code, and eventually complied with the officer's request to identify himself once he understood that they did have reasonable suspicion. It is difficult to fault Mr. Bystander for being nervous and defensive, of considering how the officers approached him, and the fact that he has had several negative experiences with the Gilbert Police Department in the past, but Mr. Bystander may have benefited from invoking his right to remain silent and complying with the officers sooner. Nonetheless, he did a good job of maintaining his composure and explaining that he believed his actions were lawful. As mentioned before, it is impossible to speculate on the legality of his flight without the drone footage, and Mr. Bystander told me that he did not want to include the footage in the video for legal reasons. Mr. Bystander also informed me that he filed complaints against all of the officers involved in this encounter. Thank you very much for watching the video. Subscribe our channel for next video.